Welcome back to the Mommy Rebellion, where once again I'm sitting down with another mom and having a chat. And because I always forget to do it at the end, please like and subscribe if you want to know when we're coming out with more interviews, because I always forget to do this at the end. And today I am joined with Andrea Parker, who has just started a brand new business. What's it called again, Andrea?
It's called Embody Your Magic, and it's a mixture of coaching and creative inspirations and different ways that we can embody everything that we feel and want to bring into the world.
Which sounds like something we all need, especially in our current world, right?
Yes, absolutely. Not just adults, but kids too.
Yeah. So today I believe we're talking about creativity and how that's been going with the, is she a teenager already?
She is. She is 14.
I know. Yep. I've got a 14-year-old too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of stuff that's, that goes with that, on top of the fact that we're in a pandemic and, schooling, although for her, schooling is not that different, but there's, the extra things like being out, having to be outside all day because she goes to an outdoor school. So when it's cold and then you have masks on, and then at the age of 14, you get acne. So your acne is even, more pronounced, and, you're more tired, and schools, aren't necessarily set up at the times that work for teens. And so there's just a lot of pieces that she's been navigating, and, it's, some days are great. And then some days we have giant, meltdowns, and that's part of it.
We've had a lot of meltdowns. I've got 5 kids, so there's lots of meltdowns that happen. But definitely there's been discussion about the maskne. My kids also like the fact that their face is a little warmer with a mask on. So they've noticed, that kind of, in the summer that's annoying, but in like the bridge seasons, it's nice to have a slightly warmer face. But yeah, I'm guessing, because I know that in the past your daughter's been big in theater and stuff, that a lot of those extracurricular things just aren't happening, or the play dates, or the,
Yeah, I mean, and she is such a social being. I mean, she is a Libra, and if you know anything about human design, she's a projector. She's just like, she's a person that really needs to be around people. And thankfully for technology, she is able to, have those conversations with her friends outside of school. But yeah, there has been no theater. Her music, like, she normally plays a saxophone. She can't play the saxophone at school this year. So she's taken up the piano, which is good. I mean, it's a different challenge. It's fun for her, but there's also no singing. And, she's a kid that she's always, singing in her room, singing, with friends, making up songs. And it's just, I think it's like one more thing that's kind of been, taken away. And I know the theater program, though, is trying to shift into doing more film. So we're going to see if maybe in January there's going to be an opportunity to do a small film with her theater program. So that would be exciting.
Yeah, I know when I've run Girl Scout meetings, the fact that we can't sing, because I often use that as a filler. Like, if they finish things too quickly, we'll get up and do a silly song. We can't do that. And it's like they've taken a whole tool out of my toolbox.
Yeah. Well, what we've found that sometimes it was just and I know you're a big proponent of dance parties. So it's just putting on some music and dancing. I mean, I know her friends and her, like, they're making little tiny videos for each other and sending them back and forth.
Bring me myth. Yeah.
So I feel like they're figuring out how to do little pivots, but it's really tiring to be constantly either feeling like, okay, I have to be prepared to have to pivot somehow, or you're pivoting.
Yeah.
And it's just like this constant waiting or shifting game.
Yeah, it
And so
is.
energetically, it's really hard on all of us. Hello, sweet baby.
Hi.
Um,
You hungry? Or are you just going to come say hi?
so I feel like things like trying to figure out how to, make sure we're getting outside, getting like going on walks. Lila's also really gotten into photography. So it's fun if we go outside and we go for walks and she can take pictures of whatever she wants and we just kind of can play that way. And then we've had a couple times where like the three girls that are in her, she only has 4 girls in her class.
Yeah.
4 kids total in the 8th grade. So they've come over a couple times or she's gone to someone else's house and they have like a fire outside. So they get a little bit of that time, but it's still, right now it's starting to get cold and yes, they have their gear and we can make a fire, but it's still just not
the same
when you're fluid. It's not as fluid.
Yeah. It's not the same when your nose is super cold and you're trying,
No.
Yeah.
Or if you have to pee and like trying not to have people at this point. Like for a while we were letting people come in to use the bathroom, but now it's kind of like we're just no one's comfortable with people coming in your house. So then it's like, okay, so you have to go, we call it fairy pee. It comes from a long time ago, but to go pee in the woods when it's 20 degrees outside, it's not so cool.
It's not fun. And I mean, for us, even just making a grocery run has the added complication of we live half an hour away from most everything, half an hour away from a grocery store of any size. Right now, the bathrooms are still open in the grocery store, but do you even really want to use it? I mean, and, if I've got any of the kids, there's so many places that we used to be able to use a bathroom, fairly safely, and they might not have been high use places that now like they don't have any bathrooms. So it's
that's a whole other piece too.
And like I don't want to just stop and take my kids to a gas station because so many of those places, at least up here, are not following the mask rules that I don't even want to walk into those places. So that and I think we get so much extra information when we're in person with someone that while video is better than written, like I'm thinking, back when I just had pen pals and isolation would have been really hard. But it still takes I feel like it takes a lot more energy to show up virtually, sometimes than in person, even as someone who's a bit more on the introvert end of the scale. There's still energy being used, especially if you've got technology issues or if anyone in the group is having a technology issue.
Well, it's interesting too. I've noticed, and luckily my daughter and I, we've really set up kind of a container for communication, but that if there's issues with it, because sometimes they have they have group chats. And so there's multiple people in there. And sometimes it's like, half of them and the other few you might not know so well. And so sometimes there's things that pop up and you don't really know about it. And you don't also have a way to like even really connect with, because you don't necessarily know those other kids either. So that's a whole other level of I don't even want to say monitoring. It's just more like holding that space for them to work through issues that they might be having.
Well, and it makes, we've been having a lot of conversations. I don't know if you're familiar with Brené Brown's concept of a marble jar friend, but, someone that you put, marbles, they'll keep your secrets, they'll keep your confidences versus people who don't, who take marbles out of your jar. And how it's important to have a few people that are marble jar friends, but like the whole world doesn't need to be, doesn't need to know everything. Or, I don't want to say all your secrets because I don't think things are necessarily secrets, but you don't need to share everything with everyone.
Every part of you. Exactly. And, and we've had that, she's, just trying to navigate, what to say, or, when to kind of step away when there's things going on that you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
And asking for help. Sometimes she's like, but you're not supposed to, your parents aren't supposed to know everything. I'm like, no, we don't need to know everything. But if there's something that's creating an issue with inside you, sharing that, and you don't have to share names, you can share just situations that then you can get some help with. So it is that, not, because you're wanting them to have their independence, but also not being in their room shut away for hours.
You don't need to unplant the plants. You don't need to unpot the plants. No, you don't. No, you don't. There's plenty of things to do down there without pulling out my plants that are in the way. You know how that
pretty.
goes.
It's fun.
They smell good because they're herbs, right?
Mm.
Yeah, we've also had my 12-year-old is really struggling with what is honesty, because she's like, if you don't tell one person everything, because I've been talking about that, if you don't tell one person everything, then what is really being honest? And then also the concept of lies of omission, because as adults, we navigate that all the time. And sometimes it's just easier to not. I hurt myself. I'm sorry, you hurt yourself. Do you need some ice? No. No? Because you're upset? And she gets upset when you get upset? Yes. Love you. Want to come with us? Nope, she doesn't want to come with you. Hi. Unpotting plants is so much more fun. Because in an adult life, you don't necessarily tell people everything. Sometimes you choose not to say anything rather than to get into a confrontation or get into a fight, or it's just none of their business sometimes. So we've been having lots of discussions about how do you navigate that too,
Yeah, and that's definitely, when you're at that age of trying to not, like, feeling, it's kind of like working within the gray.
Yeah.
And realizing that if you do omit things, it doesn't necessarily mean you're lying. It can mean, like, I mean, certain, that's the whole thing. It's like the nuances of communication are,
even as adults, I think we work on that sometimes, as well as there's, just the whole holidays are coming and you're keeping secrets because you don't want people to know what's in that package, or, like there's that level of lying, or admitting or omission. It goes on too. Bye. We've seen you. Off you go. So how have you been using creativity with some of these issues?
Well, so I think, like, Lila and I, like, we both love to do art and all of that. And so we've tried to really make a time. And lately, I feel like the last couple of weeks, we've not been great at it. We were for a while, of like having at least once a week where we just kind of, she has this big, huge desk. It's basically an old dining room table.
Yeah.
So we just sit there together and we do our own things, but we're there, we're doing stuff and we're talking. And it's just that way of connecting with her in a way that she's relaxed. We're having fun. Sometimes we'll play, we usually play music from her playlist. So she's sharing music with me. We've also been doing that in the car too, which is really fun. Is she gets to be in charge of the playlist. So, and I've learned to love new artists that I hadn't known before.
Yeah.
So that, I feel like those things, but also, doing yoga together. We started doing that early on, and now she's actually taken that and she does it with her friends. So that you can do, like, where you share a movie, well, you can do that with like a yoga video or a workout video. So there's like 2 or 3 of them, and then you choose a time every, like, a couple days a week, they get on and they do that. So it's like just doing some movement together, but just thinking about how we can creatively connect. And because it's that time, it's kind of like for us, it's always been the nighttime, but now she's staying up later than I am. So we don't always have that. And so it's kind of, I've been trying to think, okay, so how do we now evolve that kind of time, which is where was a time where things would, like the barriers would come down and things would be shared and we could have those discussions. And so now we're just doing that around art, but you could do that around games, or you can do that around, you know, and we do that when we go out for our walks too, you know, it's just, but really trying to at least have a couple times a week where you can be, you know, have that time with one-on-one time with your child. I mean, with you, with having all your girls, that's a little more challenging, but you know, it might be spread out. We
still manage to get it in as long as we don't count the baby. And at this point, she doesn't talk too much, so she's not too interrupty. But like my eldest is doing a book in Girl Scouts as part of a book club. And so she and I have been listening to that together, just us when we get a few minutes. And growing up, because I was homeschooled growing up, my mom and I used to play computer games side by side. And because we weren't looking at each other, that's when I would do all that talking like you're describing. And so I think that's really helpful. So some of that for us happens in the car because my older two girls are old enough to sit in the front seat now. So even if there are other kids in the back, they're usually doing something else, because that's one of the places where I do allow tablet time because we are so far away from everything. And the baby's got like a music box she plays with and stuff. And so we do tend to have a bit more of those conversations, like if we're driving somewhere, or not so much right at the moment because it's you know, we've got partial snow on the ground, but a lot of it was also happening this year when we were out gardening or doing stuff outside. And it would sort of, kids would just kind of find their time in among that, you know, depending on what they were doing and how much they wanted to be involved and stuff. So I think that helps too. It's a little harder to go for walks right where I live because we don't have any sidewalks, and the road I live on is a 45-mile-an-hour road. So it doesn't, like this time of year with the snow, I wouldn't even try. It just doesn't feel super safe with the cars. So it's a little harder because while there are places near us that we could go hiking, it's just that when you've got 5 kids, that's an event. Like you've got to pack everyone up, you got to get everybody there, and so often we've got stuff that we're doing around our little 2 acres that it's like, I don't want to take half of the day to go hiking, you know, like.
Yeah, and you have a lot going on there. I mean, you have like a mini farm, so
we do, so
which is pretty amazing. Yeah, and I think for Lily, I mean, she's an only, well, she has a half sister, but her half sister lives in Boston. So she's really like an only child. And so, you know, thankfully she does have her friends and ways to communicate with them, but it's still, there's days where I'm just like, you're just in your room, like, you know, having to make sure that she's getting, getting the social time, but also getting the movement time and getting sunshine.
That's a huge thing. Because we have animals, that does make at least the older girls get out every day because there's animals to take care of. And that's also part of why we have the animals. It kind of, because we all kind of want a hermit, especially this time of year. We're like, okay, let's just stay in the house. And it's like, no, that's not really good for you. I think you got to balance that, you know. I also think, I mean, I'm a little sad that there aren't holiday parties this year, but I'm also glad that I'm not like really having to hold boundaries and saying, no, we can't go and do everything. And that's a little bit helpful. One of the things that my 14-year-old ended up doing with her best friend is they ended up getting the same sock advent calendar for the holidays. And so every day they've been sending each other pictures of their feet. And it's silly, but it's
that is
fun.
silly and fun. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think what we're planning to do as a family is we're going to, probably starting about the time this video comes out, we're going to start making Valentines for the people that are important in our life, just because we're not seeing people as much. And, you know, it brightens everybody's mailbox to get like a fun Valentine. So
yeah, that's a really nice idea.
I think we're going to take sort of the Swedish, I don't know if the Swedish or Norwegian, but the folded hearts and kind of base Valentines around that. So sort of folded a holiday or two ahead, but I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a really nice way to do that.
As well as it gives us something to do, like, you know.
Yeah.
Hi.
I know we were hoping to make Christmas cookies, and then I started thinking about, I was like,
who's
probably not giving Christmas cookies to people this year. And, you know, so we're just choosing to make one type of cookie that we'll just get to enjoy. And, you know, that's that.
Yeah. How has, you mentioned that our half sister is in Boston. Has she not been able to see that portion of her family as much because of COVID? Or have you guys been able to figure things out?
We've been able to figure things out. So this summer, when things weren't quite as crazy, she went there a couple times. And then when the numbers started coming up again, and I mean, thankfully her stepmom and stepdad both are working at home.
Yeah.
But her sister does go to a school. It's a very small school, kind of like the school Lila goes to here. Yeah. But so Lila has gone there twice since school started, and she's had to get tested and do all of that. And that's just it's the way it is. But she had, you know, so it's not as often as she normally would see them, but she has gotten to see them. And she will go after Christmas for probably 4 or 5 days and spend, you know, so she has enough time to come back, get tested and quarantine for a bit and then
go back to school. Yeah. So that's just like added a whole other level of complication.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know, and it's definitely, you know, it's challenging for her. It's challenging for her dad. It's challenging for her sister because her sister's, you know, 6. Yeah. So she's a lot younger. And, you know, loves Lila to be there. Yeah. But I think thankfully I think so many of these kids are so aware and so understanding. Yeah. Which definitely has made things as a parent easier. But I just think about their mental well-being a lot.
I think about everybody's mental well-being. Yes. I mean, we were having a discussion with the older girls about, you know, something that we'd heard on a podcast about a family where they'd chosen to get together for Thanksgiving. One of the elderly members had fainted, so they took her mask off, and unbeknownst to them at the time, she had COVID and spread it to the rest of the family. And talking about what that's got to do for people for guilt. And I said, that's what we're going to be dealing with for the next 10 years is people processing the guilt of, you know, making choices that maybe they shouldn't have made or wish they'd made different choices and the dire consequences of some of that. And we were also talking a few nights ago, we were talking about, you know, how different generations have different names. You know, there's the boomers and the X-gens and then the Zennials where I am and the millennials, and not knowing what their current generation is called and thinking that it might be called something around COVID because it is like fundamentally changing who they are and how they interact. And I mean, I think some of it's good. I've gotten to participate in things because they've taken place virtually that with a young baby, I would not have been able to participate in. Yeah. You know, so I've been grateful for some of that. And I'm grateful that I don't always have to leave my home to take my kids to things, that they just have to Zoom into things. So I think some of those changes are good. And I do hope that some of the curbside pickup stays the same because as a mom, That is so helpful
Yes.
to just be able to order, pull up, and have them bring you the stuff, or,
Well, and as an elderly person too, or someone that has limited mobility, like
exactly.
all these things. I think some of these systems I think will stay on because we see as a society that it's not just for this time, but it actually helps all the people in our community. And yeah, and getting back to that, like the mental, like kind of well-being piece, Lila, there's times of overwhelm and like how, and I mean, and she's like in school. And so it's how to navigate with the teachers, trying to make her advocate for herself, but also knowing that that's a whole other layer to ask her to do on top of everything else. So it's really thinking about what are we asking of our children? What should we be expecting? And what also should we be pulling back as far as expectations go? Because as an adult right now, if we're asked to do one more thing, I know for me, I've broken. Yeah. And so like thinking about what that's doing to these people that don't have as much experience and might crack easier because unfortunately we've all created shells as we've gotten older.
Or
some of us are working to soften those shells.
Or they just don't understand that they can say no, like I think, or that they can ask for help, or that what they're being asked to do is beyond what they should. Because I think that happens sometimes too, I know as an adult, sometimes I've been asked to do things which are beyond what I should be asked to do. And I think that can also happen, especially to, I think, the teenage level, because I think there's so many different expectations. I mean, the teenager thing has only existed about the past 70 or so years. It was a marketing thing that came out in the 1950s. So this whole concept of this, not an adult, but not a kid, like we're still as a society trying to figure out how we even deal with that. And I think that often, sometimes they don't think they're asked to do enough, but I think often they're being asked to do too much, or you don't know enough about everything that's going on to know whether it's appropriate to ask them to do that,
Yeah. And I think, school, it's like they're not getting that one-on-one attention really with their teachers. So, I mean, Lila does some, but I mean, even like last week, there was this whole thing where she came home after a weekend and they were given like 2 days to do kind of 4 kind of hefty assignments. And she had total melt because she was just like, it's just too much. Because she had things she knew, like she had her music class on Tuesday and she had her climate action group meeting on Tuesday. So she was just like, how am I going to get all this done and do all this? And I said, well, let's think about the one thing you can do right now. It's the one easiest thing to get off your plate. But then she contacted her teacher asking about maybe one of the assignments could be extended to Thursday. And her teacher did not respond well to that at all. She was like, sometimes assignments are assignments and you don't get to have the ability to change them. And she was just like, I'm just overwhelmed. Like, and she went on to explain her feelings. And her teacher thought it was really rude, which I found interesting. It was like, so this child is expressing her emotions. She's just 14 and she, like, and I what I realized is that I think this particular teacher gets triggered by when people are emotional.
Could be. I mean,
and so we talked about that. I said, I mean, because I kind of okayed this email to go out. I was like, you think it's so? I said, you're expressing your feelings. I think it's extremely okay. I said, you might not get the answer back you want, which you definitely didn't. But it was just kind of, I was like, oh, that's kind of setting her up for like, oh, so I'm saying, hey, can we maybe do this differently? And the reaction was a typical, authority reaction, like, no, do as I say. And I was like, okay, well, now I have some unworking to do on that part for her.
But unfortunately, that's often, I mean, I grew up with a father in academia, and they didn't really, I mean, unless it was a death in the family, they really didn't care.
Yeah.
You know.
I know.
And
but this is different. It's like, I feel like last year I would have been like, yeah, no, you're just, that's it. But like, that's what I'm saying. It's like, there's a whole extra layer. And if we are
but
really
there's an
wanting,
extra layer on the teachers too. And maybe they can't bend because they've got that extra layer as well.
Well, that's why I think, you know, it was, I mean, they're all emotionally, mentally, physically all taxed too. It was just like, so I didn't necessarily, you know, I didn't get angry with her, but it was more like, oh, I was able to see the different things at play. But at the same time, it was, you know, it was hard to see my daughter just like go into that full on, you know, down spiral of like, I should, you know, I was wrong to express myself this way. I shouldn't have, you know, and I was like, no, I said, for this particular teacher, I think that this type of response is what, you know, triggers this kind of reaction. So I think maybe we can think about a different way to express the way that you're feeling, but it should, in no way, shape, or form should you not feel free to express how you're feeling. Like that's super important as a young woman this day and age. So
it is. It is. So is there anything else you want to touch on in terms of, you know, keeping creativity alive in this crazy pandemic world?
I think it's just finding those little kind of fun, silly things that you can do, whether it's with your, you know, for yourself or with your kids. We were talking, I was talking with a friend. Yeah, I was talking with a friend about making, you know, because we couldn't do cookies, but it's like, oh, but we could make funky little ornaments. Like she's part of this group called Fugly Ornaments. So you make these ornaments that are really kind of funky, maybe a little ugly, a little silly, and then you just, you kind of do a swap with them. But just thinking about, okay, what do we have around our house that we could just either make something with, do something, and just kind of get back to having those kind of creative, community creative times, whether it's in your, you know, just in your family. Twister, I think it's fun. You know, like silly games that are like
the biggest problem that I've discovered about my house that I didn't really realize much before this is how little floor space we actually have. So like I couldn't actually do yoga with all my kids because we couldn't all fit in the same room on the floor. And so how much, you know, when it was warmer, we utilized doing stuff outside and then just trying to think about, well, how can we make things different inside this year? Because I've got the added that my husband is working from home. He's been working from home almost the whole year. He's set to stay home until next summer. And so loud, obnoxious dance parties in the middle of the afternoon is not an option.
Those you could probably do outside. Probably put all the gear on if you wanted to.
We probably could, but
But it's still, there's going to be days where you really need to get outside and you don't want to go outside.
Yeah, so I'm still trying to figure out some of that. But yeah, we've been doing silly things and you know, just trying to be creative doing things. We instead of buying a new scratching pad for the cats, we looked up how to recycle some cardboard and make our own. And right now my 8-year-old's in the middle of making one. I want to make one because you can take strips of cardboard and curl them up on themselves and make a circular one. So I want to try making one of those later. And you know, we don't have to do it, but it's fun. It'll be somewhat useful afterward, and it's keeping us busy. So.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, I think any of those little things. Because, you know, and it might be that you don't have the whole family doing it together.
Yeah.
It might just be a couple people here and there. But yeah, I just think it's it's so important that we're not all shut into our little rooms and on our screens, you know.
Yeah.
Because we kind of have to be in certain ways, but we also, it's making sure that we have that time to disconnect from this and connect with that and
with who we are. Yeah. And it can totally be, you know, you can also, you know, go cooking and do some of those things, you know.
Yeah.
I've had to check with Bella, who is 8, the other day. She's like, Mom, I want to make something. And I'm like, what do you want to make? And it ended up being she wanted to make brownies. But, you know, sometimes they want to make something and sometimes they want to cook something. And, you know, it's like, you need to give me some parameters of what it is you're looking for here, you know.
No, Lila, I've been teaching her how, like, so at dinner time, she comes down and we talk about, and like, she kind of helps me do it all. So she's kind of learning. So she'll have like a staple, like, you know, 10 solid recipes of things that she knows how to make.
Yeah.
And then I can start having her make dinner.
Yeah, we did a lot of that last year when I was pregnant, because I was not up for doing much cooking. And so the older two did a lot of, either they did it themselves or they were given instructions, but I was in a completely other room while they made stuff, because just, and I agree, it's important to know how to feed yourself.
It is, and healthfully, like, you know, yes, Lila can easily make a box of macaroni and cheese, but this is like, okay, so how do you marinate a piece of meat? And then how do you cook these different kinds of pieces of meat? And how do we, like, I mean, roasting vegetables is pretty easy. Like, you just chop it up and like, what do you do? But like, just thinking of how to make those different kinds of things.
And how to read a recipe and then how to adjust it. You know, it was
really
loud.
What do we do?
We do a lot of, well, everything gets doubled in my house, but we do a lot of trying to teach them applications rather than this is the set recipe, you know. So you can, you know, you sub with what vegetables you have, and you know, that kind of thing.
I don't really use recipes that often unless I'm really specifically, like if I'm baking, I do, because I'm not much of a baker, and it is a science, like it is chemistry.
It can be, I don't think I don't think it has to be as hard as some people make it out to be, but it depends on whether you're making it for a commercial application where you need absolutely every single baked item to be exactly the same versus, you know, rustic home eating, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, like if you're making banana bread, there's certain things you can substitute for, but certain things like cheesecake is a little different, I think. I don't know.
I don't know. I've been dealing with food allergies my whole life, because both my brother and my husband have the same food allergy. And so I've been making substitutions in all recipes for a very long time. So there's a lot more wiggle room than people think, as long as you understand your ingredients and how they work together.
Yeah, I think, that is important. That's a whole other lesson too. It's like, let them experiment and be like, oh, what did you put in there? And be like, oh, okay, so maybe that wasn't.
I also like to point out that it doesn't always work out, that, you know, I've made thousands of pancakes in my life. Statistically, sometimes it's going to fail, you know, like, you know, just pointing some of those things out too, I think is important.
Yeah, it is.
So if people want to find out more about you, where did they go?
Well, so right now, because my website is being built. But so I have a Facebook, which is Embody Your Magic, or my handle on Instagram is Embodied Magic with Andrea. So you can.
Awesome. And that'll be in the show notes below as well. So well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to talk to you and hear how everything's going in your neck of the woods.
Yes. And I look forward to seeing you in the real flesh at some point.
Yes, we actually live only about a half an hour from each other. So
that'd be nice.
Yeah.
Maybe summertime.
Maybe, yeah.